Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. A really pretty massive week for global equity markets. Obviously started with the US election, which really looked a pretty tight race at one point. But then as the sort of postal votes started to come through, obviously that was promoted by the Democratic Party in the light of COVID. Joe Biden then started to sort of creep ahead in the sort of key swing states of Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. And also Georgia as well. So as it stands at the moment, Joe Biden is the president-elect, and he's acting accordingly, sort of forming a transition team. The only problem is that President Trump has refused to concede, claims there was widespread voter fraud, although yet no evidence has been found of that. The other issue as well is obviously President Trump and his team has launched major legal litigations in Georgia and Pennsylvania and other states. Most of these that have been heard before the courts so far have all been thrown out, really through lack of evidence. It's all very well to sort of make accusations of voter fraud, irregularities, etc. But really you have to provide some evidence in order to go to court and prove your case. And so far the Trump administration has failed to provide any of that evidence. Although this morning I see that Georgia has announced that they will have a hand recount of the votes. Now, Joe Biden won that state by around 14,000 votes. So, potentially what the Trump administration is saying is that whether there were 14,000 irregularities or voter frauds in that state, that seems very unlikely. And certainly the speeches that Joe Biden has given have appeared very sort of presidential, talking about sort of healing the sort of divisions within the US and trying to bring both sides together. Now that is in stark contrast to the Republicans. Donald Trump, President Trump has only given one sort of speech, which was to say that actually he won the election, then it was stopped. They had to stop the counting, and they stole the election from him, and everyone knew that he'd won. And just one interesting point: ex-President George W. Bush, who obviously was a Republican, has congratulated Joe Biden on winning the election. So that that's sort of quite interesting. That one of the esteemed figures within the Republican Party has come out to congratulate Joe Biden, accepted the result, and is ready to move forward. That sort of gave the markets a little bit of a boost, and the fact that with a Democratic president, although they didn't get the Senate, the Democrats, it looks like the Republicans will hold the Senate. That will obviously sort of push through a reasonably large sort of stimulus package for the US economy. That should be good for stocks and good for global stocks. Then on the back of that, just as we digested that news, Pfizer have come out with their COVID vaccine, and that has proved to be over 90% effective. Now that really is a major game changer. Apparently in the trials they were looking for somewhere between sort of 60 to 80% effectiveness. So it's come out at over 90% on a sample of around 43,000 people. So that's really pretty major news, and is another step further forward to try and sort of combating this virus. So already on the back of that, the major sort of airline stocks, airports, etc., really received a major boost. And although it's not going to take the world back to a more sort of normal stance straight away and overnight, it is certainly a step in the right direction. And that really can't come quickly enough with the US sort of recording record cases in many states with COVID. Obviously, Europe in sort of partial lockdowns, the UK as well. UK has actually sort of installed pretty much compulsory testing in some cities in the UK. Liverpool is one of them, and they're starting to test everyone there just to try and isolate those who have COVID and those who don't. Looming pretty large is sort of Christmas, which is only around 7 weeks away, and certainly most countries would like to see the virus certainly under control and some of these restrictions lifted so that people can actually get around and sort of celebrate Christmas. So as I say, that was a pretty major boost for global equities. Obviously on the back of that, oil picked up and is back above $40 a barrel now. So as discussed, the UK is doing it pretty tough and faces a very tough sort of next 2 to 3 weeks. Really trying to get a bit of a sort of circuit breaker. Really, I say, just really trying to get on top of that virus. Likewise for Europe as well. Certainly countries that have seen lockdowns, obviously Australia and New Zealand, they're sort of starting to come out the other side now. Melbourne has relaxed its restrictions and sort of quarantines, and they're starting to get back, not to a normal sort of stance, but certainly a more normal stance where you can get out, businesses are open, bars, restaurants, etc. And it's starting to look a little bit more like a normal sort of lifestyle. Queensland has also lifted its quarantine for people visiting the state. So it's just going to be very interesting to see how the Australian economy now sort of picks up on the back of that. Certainly the Reserve Bank is doing all it can over in Australia. It's cut the sort of cash rate down to a 0.1%. Now here in New Zealand, we've still got closed borders, although obviously New Zealanders can travel to Australia without quarantining, but when they come back to New Zealand, they still have to quarantine for 2 weeks. You've still got New Zealand residents and sort of permanent resident holders coming back to New Zealand as well. They still have to quarantine for 2 weeks as well. So effectively, the border is still closed, although obviously with Australia and also the islands as well, there is certainly growing talk now about a potential sort of bubble where we'll be able to travel between those two sort of countries and islands. So again, New Zealand economy is doing okay-ish. Obviously, it's just really sort of suffering really on the back of tourism, but the rest of the sort of sectors are doing pretty well. Really led by the housing market with record low interest rates. Also as well, obviously, you've got all these sort of expats coming back to New Zealand that are pretty much cashed up and looking for properties. and there is still a major shortage of properties. Supply and demand is still a major imbalance out there. Now, while the Reserve Bank left the cash rate at 0.25, there is some talk that it will actually go negative next year. Now, obviously, on the back of low interest rates, it's all very well for borrowers, but obviously savers suffer as well. And given that, sort of outlook, corporates are issuing bonds at the present. Currently, Coros have a bond in the marketplace at 7 and 10 year. That's likely to be sort of 1.7 to 2% sort of fixed for the next 7 or 10 years. Now, if you're interested in that, call us on 0800 867 323. Now, if you are looking for income, there's plenty of alternatives available out there, plenty of reasonable dividend stocks out there, and they'll give you a pretty decent return. And if you're interested in discussing what is available, call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.